Okay, welcome to Cooking Done Right, inaugural episode. As you can tell by the spread, we're making chili today. Let's go through the ingredients. Chuck roast. Get some fat in there. Fat's good for you. Fat's flavor. You can make it with ground beef, but why? Guajillo chilies. These are kind of your quintessential Mexican chili flavor. These are not spicy. We're going to use some of the dehydrated ones today and make our own chili powder. Ancho chilies, another one, dehydrated, one of your classic chili flavors. These are kind of quite smoky, give it a nice smoke flavor to your chili. So first things first, we can go through the rest of the veg. A couple onions, 5 or 6 cloves of garlic. These are kind of tiny, so I went 6 here. Celery, a bit controversial. I like celery in my chili. A red pepper. This guy's giant, so maybe if you had medium ones, you use 2 of them. Some poblano peppers. These are going to be not spicy either. Once in a while you get one that's a little bit spicy, but usually these are not. I'll probably put 3 or 4 of these in. Have to see what it looks like when we chop them up. Jalapeno peppers, we're probably going to put in 2 of these for this much meat. Let's see how that goes. You're going to want some good quality bone broth. We're going to be reducing this, so it's important to get the low sodium variety so you have some control over the salt. Chipotle peppers in adobo. We want them in adobo because you're going to want that delicious sauce that's inside there. These are just smoked jalapenos, but they tend to be quite hot, so we'll probably put about 2 of those in there. We'll see. We're going to make a mild-ish chili, see if we can keep it wife-friendly for today. Beans. Kidney beans, pinto beans. I like to do a mix. Sometimes instead of pinto, I'll do black beans. It's up to you. If you're in Texas, you've already stopped listening, and that's okay. Can of diced tomatoes. Maybe this will be enough. Again, we'll kind of have to see. Sometimes I'll put about 1.5 of these in there. Chopped green chilies. These are just kind of a canned jalapeno, but they have like an interesting brined flavor that I like, so I'll probably put in 1 whole can of these. Some spices that we're going to be using. We'll get to these in a second after we go through the preparation of the peppers. So the first step here, we're going to make our own chili powder with the dehydrated peppers, and we're going to get that blended up into a nice paste with the bone broth and let it kind of sit there, let the flavors get to know each other before we start browning down the meat. So these dehydrated chilies are kind of raisin-like in texture, and you can hear the seeds in them. So the easiest way to deal with this is to just take them over to your sink, trim the top of it off, and then if you just work it a little bit, you can dump those seeds right out. You don't have to be perfect. We're going to put it in the blender. Scissors is probably the fastest way to dispose of these, just to give them some chunks that'll break up a bit nicer. Same thing with the anchos. These are softer, so you can usually just kind of rip the top right off of those. Try and get most of the seeds out of there. Same thing with these. I cut these up into some strips that the blender can take care of more readily. You can see some of these have already started to do here. Okay, good enough. Let's get those into the blender. Push our mess over to the side here. Shouldn't be needing those scissors anymore. We're gonna put some garlic in there too. I'll show you one of these and then we can come back and do the rest off camera so that you don't have to watch me peel garlic. It's not terribly exciting, but that's all you had to do. Smash it right in there. As promised, our chipotle chilies in adobo. Let's get the top off of this guy. You can see, oh, these are actually quite small, so we're gonna pull out more than one of those. Put those in the blender. I think we're gonna go with 3 today, and then we'll always taste it. Get a good amount of that sauce in there. The adobo sauce is part of the delicious part. Okay, set that off to the side. And the beef broth, let's get this shaken up. There we go. We're gonna end up reducing this, so it's okay if you put in a little bit too much, but probably around half of this. You're gonna want just a good amount so that we can get the blender to blend is all we're trying to accomplish with that. Okay, let's rinse off our adobo spoon real quick. Spices. Mexican oregano. It's a little bit different than Greek oregano. Not 100% required. If you can't find it, you can use the Greek oregano. This one's kind of it has a sharper, more grassy, less herbal kind of flavor. Put a good amount of that in the blender. Cumin, another one that's critical. Put quite a bit of that in there. I'd say that was probably 3 tablespoons. Chili powder. The single best thing you can do for your chili, other than making your own chili powder, is to make sure that you have a good chili powder to add to it. Highly recommend the Spice House. It's way better than the corn and garbage you're gonna get at the grocery store. I think that stuff is swept off the floor after they get done making the real chili powder. So get a good chili powder. It's literally in the name. That's where all of your flavor is gonna come from. So I'm gonna put in probably 4 tablespoons of this, and then we'll have to adjust those seasonings later. Worcestershire sauce. Probably not too much. A tablespoon of that, it's quite strong. Soy sauce. Maybe 2-3 tablespoons of that. And then a decent amount of salt. Again, you don't want to go overboard because you can always add more later. All right, so we're going to get that blended up. Before we make all that noise, let's talk about one more thing. For the meat here, we're going to want to brown this down. A lot of important browning flavor comes from that Maillard reaction when you brown the meat down. So you could cut this up in tiny pieces, but it's kind of like more work than it's worth. So I'm not going to show you every step of this process, but if you just take it down into, say, 2.5, 3-inch chunks like this, we're going to coat this on every side with flour, and then we're going to fry this in some whatever fat you have. Ideally, if you had like some bacon fat lying around, that would be ideal. That flour on there is going to help you get a nice deep dark brown. You got to get that brown at the bottom of the pan because this is your only opportunity to extract that flavor from the meat, and that's flavor that we want. So I'm going to do that with the rest of this, get this salted, or floured rather, get it in the pan. For this, when we get down to this end, I'm not going to worry too much about this kind of fat in here. I mean, you can trim some of this out if you're kind of, extra health conscious and it bothers you or something like that. We can take some of this stuff out, but by and large, I don't worry about that. It'll render down and we can skim the fat off the top afterwards. So anyway, there's rendition 1. We'll be right back. So part 2 here, we're going to continue with the mise en place. As you can see, the meat has been reduced. It's been floured. It's hanging out waiting for us to fry it. The other things that we need to get ready so that we can do all of our cooking at once. We have to prep a couple of onions, prep some celery. For celery, I like to just take some of the bits off the end that are maybe, I cleaned this in the sink obviously, but take some of the end bits that are a little bit old, and all these leaves and all this stuff in here, that's just great flavor. So there's no reason to do anything other than take all the pieces of that with us. That'll be delicious. So we can just chop the whole thing like this at once. That will be completely fine. So that's probably enough celery. And I like to run through it just a little bit like this so that we don't get quite such identifiably large pieces of celery in there. Not too crazy, we're not trying to make a vegetable mince or something like that. Separate that out. Let's take our bench scraper and transfer those to the pan that we're going to bring next to the stove in a minute. Okay, celery, sorted. Now, onions, those can go in the same pre-made pot here because they're going to go in the cooking pot at the same time. Just half them, tail them like this. We're going to want to pull off the outside like this. Okay, there's one half. The other half. We'll say 2 large onions, probably a good amount. You'll have to see what kind of blend you actually like in your chili for vegetables. Take these, and we want to cut wedges like this, but we don't want to cut all the way through the root end because that's what's holding us together. So we'll just go down like this, and we can go back through it. Make it nice and chunky. That's completely fine. Tip ends off. Okay, one more. See that by going through those diagonal slices, and that way they kind of break off into nice little chunks like we want. The rest of those will fall apart as we stir them in the chili. So we're going to get these transferred to our transfer bowl. Cooking always goes better when you have everything prepared ahead of time. So put yourself in best position for success by having everything done ahead of time. Okay, 2 more things to talk about. You probably see the peppers from earlier. They look a little bit different now. So to capitalize on that smoky flavor, I've taken a torch to these, and you just need to get some blackness on them. You don't need to go crazy. We certainly don't want to cook them all the way. If you don't have a kitchen torch, you could just do this in the bottom of your Dutch oven. You're going to want to keep it over medium heat, and as soon as they start to get toasty, you're going to want to pull them out a little tiny bit of blackness, but we're not trying to burn the crap out of these, okay? So I've done that with all the peppers. I'm going to cut these up. You can look at that real quick. I'm not necessarily going to show you every single one of how to do these, but I think you can get the idea if we tear the top off like that. We can save some of these good bits around the edges here. And I like to leave them good and chunky. We're going to go about like this probably. Seems good to me. Let's take this guy and open him up. And just pull out kind of this membrane in the middle here, not because you need to for any reason, it's just a little, unsightly, sort of kind of prettied up a little bit like this. Take all that off. Okay, and this will be easier if we take the bottoms off and kind of deal with those separately, right? Okay, and then for this section, we are just going to leave all of that beautiful black char right on there because that's the flavor that we were trying to develop. We don't want to peel that off. Okay. Lather, rinse, repeat. It's going to be more of the same. I'm going to come back to you after I do that to the rest of these peppers. Addressing the jalapenos real quick. Let's just see how seedy these guys are inside. Again, if you don't want it spicy or you want it less spicy, then you don't have to put all this in there. Yeah, I will go in and try and just get a small amount of these seeds out of here because that's kind of extra seedy. But again, it's chili. There should be chili remnants in it. It's okay. You don't have to go too crazy with that, okay? So we'll scrape a little bit of that out as I chop those up. But again, come back after that's done and kind of show you where everything else is at. I just wanted to point out that we did do the blending of the sauce, our kind of chili base, if you will. What you're looking for consistency is, what is that? Ketchup-ish consistency. So the next couple of steps, what we're going to do here is we're going to finish cutting up the peppers. We're going to fry down the meat in the bottom of our Dutch oven and get it nice and brown. We'll probably show you some of that footage as pictures after the fact. We're going to pull those out, and in that same oil, we're going to fry down our onions and celery and get the onions translucent with a little bit of color. You want toasty caramelization, and we don't want blackness. So control the heat. You don't want blackness. And then we're going to throw our chili paste in there. And we're going to cook that chili paste until we're kind of cooking the water out of it. We'll show you the rest of some of that. The chilies really like to be cooked and kind of develop that pan roasted flavor. That'll happen as it sits in there for a while. We want to do that before we start trying to reduce the chilies as a whole and get things like tomatoes in there, because then that's just extra liquid that'll make it take longer. So first we're going to reduce this down and get it even thicker. You'll see that in a second. So we'll come back next when we'll have meat browned and have some things on the stove already and kind of talk about what's next. All right, final product, final thoughts. How did we get here? We took the meat from earlier that we browned on each side, cut it up into much smaller pieces, like that. It's a good enough amount of browning you can see in there. See the consistency that we've got in here, nice and chunky, just the way we like it. In terms of finishing spices, there's a few to talk about that are important. Hershey's Cocoa, especially the dark one. About 2 tablespoons of that in there. It's this really interesting earthy depth that's hard to explain. It's really a good idea. Porcini mushroom powder, optional, but gives it a lot more meatiness without actually adding any more meat. Kind of an interesting choice. Again, optional. Clove is another spice that you might not expect to find in there. Maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon in all that chili. There was, I don't know, about 1.5 gallons of chili by the time I got done with it. 1/4 teaspoon of that will be plenty in there. Likewise, star anise, again, completely optional. There's an interesting flavor. If you keep this to 1/4 teaspoon or so, there isn't enough for you to detect that licoricey aniseed background, but it just adds an interesting, it blends with the meat in a way that's hard to explain. It's really good stuff. One more tip for you. You know we didn't use that entire can of chipotles and adobo. So a clever trick with that, pour it into a sandwich bag, push it around until there's about a pepper in each corner or so, like that. Draw yourself a line in the middle. Pick it up to fold it over like that. And then again, draw yourself a line in the middle, fold it over. Put it in the freezer just like that. The next day it'll be frozen solid and you'll be able to unfold it into 4 individually wrapped chunks. So next time you won't have to waste the rest of the can. So for presentation, what I like to see on here is some sour cream. It's hard to go wrong with that. Maybe even a little bit more than that. Cheese. Put all this effort into chili. Get the good stuff, all right? I'm just gonna go cheese on half like this so you can stir it in as you like. I like scallions on mine. some fresh cilantro as well. Chili, sorted.